Lehkonen now off the right corner. It's a snapshot. He scores! Lehkonen ripped it under the bar. Well, he didn't do much until that shot, but boy, that kid has some nice hands. 6-1.
8:07 on TSN 690. It's Weekend Game Plan with Matthew Ross. We're brought to you by DeadHitSports.com. Mr. Dave Trentadue is on the board. Amanda Stein of TSN 690 joins us here in studio. And we're joined on the line by Aruny of Habs Eyes on the Prize. That clip, courtesy of TSN 690 and Mr. Dan Robertson, he seemed surprised by the goal. The siren was maybe a split second too late as well. Clearly, Artturi Lehkonen's got a blistering shot. Very, very exciting, the prospect of having somebody on the second line that will not be released halfway through the year, that is not brand new to the, well, he is brand new to the NHL, but not to the professional
ranks.
Game. Yeah, exactly.
Professional ranks.
First of all, let's welcome Aruny. How you doing, sir, madam?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Amanda, I want to get your take on Lehkonen and obviously that goal. I mean, did it surprise you too?
Well, I think part of it was surprising because if you watch on the replay, it's a no-look shot. Like, he wasn't looking at the net. So I think in that respects, it surprised the goaltender. I think he maybe even surprised himself. But that was an all-world class shot with that velocity and that accuracy. Certainly nice to see. And if he wasn't convincing up until that point yet for the management, I think that one certainly sealed the deal. Because
it wasn't a foregone conclusion early on, right?
Certainly not. I don't think anything has been a foregone conclusion with any of the bubble players. And this is now, I've said it on the intermissions, this is starting to make the decision-making process for the management all that more difficult.
In terms of Lehkonen, Aruny, is this something that you see taken off this year, or is this someone who's just had a good preseason?
Well, everything we're seeing from Lehkonen right now, we've seen before. This is a kid who's been playing with and against men since he was 16 years old, starting in the Finnish Liga and in the SHL last season. The thing with him that coaches really, really like is that he's very defensively responsible and he can play under all situations. So you can throw him out on the power play, you can throw him out on the penalty kill. And for a team like Montreal, which does prize defensive awareness, having him on the second line and developing chemistry with a guy like Alex Radulov and Thomas Plekanec, it's always a good thing. It's funny
because we mentioned Radulov, and certainly I'm not going to pronounce it like Michel Lacroix, but people were worried, right, with the signing. Well, the past problems. It doesn't seem like any of that is being talked about right now. All we're seeing is highlights on the ice, and we're talking about who's going to be paired with him and who's he going to make look good, which is really a great sign.
Well, because I think essentially when he first signed here in Montreal, to me, I thought it was the steal of free agency. But when he signed here in Montreal, all people had to really remember Radulov by, because he hadn't been in the NHL so long and he'd been playing out in the KHL, was all these, things that had happened off the ice, whether it was with the Kostitsyn brothers, his, 2 times in Nashville, things didn't go well for him there. So certainly you're going to dwell only on the things that you know. When he came to Montreal and when he spoke for the first time, I stood in front of him in the locker room. He seemed sincere. He seemed honest in saying that. And one of the things that stuck out to me the most, and I've said this many times on this radio station, is he says, I'm here not only to prove to other people that I belong in this team, in this league, but most importantly, I want to prove it to myself.
And it's got to help that this is a team that traditionally and currently has a lot of other Russians, right? With Markov and Yemelin and, Galchenyuk, Belarusian, but
well, keep in mind, he's also very adapted to Canadian lifestyle, right? He played as junior with the Ramparts. He played, he was a big star in Quebec. So certainly that also, I don't know if so much having the Russian contingent here is a big part of it. Certainly it's nice in the locker room to have, people from your country, I would imagine, that you can relate to on different aspects. But when it comes to, Quebec in particular, he spent a lot of time in this province.
Weekend Game Plan with Matthew Ross. It's Habs Breakfast here on TSN 690. Amanda Stein in studio. Artturi Lehkonen of Habs Eyes on the Prize on the phone. Speaking of Radulov, did you guys do any projections over on that website? Do you guys have expectations for point totals for him, perhaps?
Well, with Radulov, he's had 238 points in the last 181 games that he's played in the KHL, which, if you use the NHL calculator, translates to an NHL equivalent of around 86 points. Now,
all right, I'll take that. Done. Finished. Perfect.
That might seem a tad bit high. I mean, Max Pacioretty led the Canadiens in scoring last season, and he had 64 points. But if he could even get to 60 points, that would be a boost for the Canadiens.
Is that the magic total, you think, Amanda, to make this all worthwhile, 60-point total?
I think if he can contribute and not be a distraction off the ice, I think no matter what he does, he's going to be able to contribute. I think 60 is a great number to look for, especially when you have a team that perhaps lacks in scoring in some elements. But I think more so than that, I think what is the most important part about Radulov is he gives them diversity. He gives them opportunity to rest some of their other offensive players and not lean so heavily on the Max Pacioretty. Maybe, Pacioretty can have a better season than leading the team last year because he's not dependent on so much. I think he gives them a versatility that they haven't had in many years.
All right, over on the defensive side of things, Mark Barberio was let go this week, and that was kind of a surprise to some when you think about where this team was a few weeks ago or a few months ago, not when you factor in how well Zach Redmond was playing. This from Fred in Côte St. Luc, 11-690 if you want to text us on Weekend Game Plan with Matthew Ross. Another reason I believe Mark Barberio cleared waivers is the term of his contract. His contract's 2 years. One way, a lot of teams would not wish to pay an NHL player salary while playing in the AHL. Did this one catch you off guard, Aruny?
A bit. It seems weird in a sense that the Canadiens did send Mark Barberio down. If you look at the Canadiens right now, they do have a lot of defensemen on their roster. And to keep a guy like Mikhail Sergachev while sending down Mark Barberio seems quite an odd choice. That being said, if you look down their depth chart, especially down that left defenseman line, they don't have many puck-moving defensemen on that side. You have Nathan Beaulieu, but then you have Andrei Markov and Alexei Yamelin, who aren't really known for their transition games and for their foot speed, especially. And to have a guy like Mikhail Sergachev, I guess, learn is great in theory, but with Sergachev, the problem is that you might end up burning a year of his entry-level contract if you play him more than 10 games.
I think really what it is in terms of if you're debating between Sergachev and Mark Barberio is that this is an opportunity for Sergachev to have a bit more NHL experience. I mean, I don't think we're talking about who's the better defenseman. I think Sergachev will undoubtedly be the better defenseman out of two. And you can't send him to AHL training camp. You'd have to send him back to junior. That is the only option here. You either keep him or you send him back to junior because of the age rules in the different leagues. Now, François Gagnon yesterday reporting that Sergachev will start the year with the Montreal Canadiens. Whether it's beyond the 10 games or not is yet to be seen, but I can tell you right now that, we know we have François Gagnon on this station 3 times a week on the morning show, that, he's reliable. He's a reliable source. So don't look for Sergachev to be part of the final cuts here. He will start the season, and he earned it. I mean, he had a bit of a slow start, but in these last couple games, I've been at the Bell Center. I've watched him. He is an incredible skater. He's a good defenseman, and he's learning on the fly here, and I think there's no harm in keeping him here, especially if you're debating over Mark Barberio versus Sergachev if you want to get the numbers down. Sergachev is the right person to keep in Montreal.
Weekend Game Plan with Matthew Ross. Habs breakfast segment here on TSN 690. Amanda Stein, TSN 690 here in studio. Artturi Lehkonen of Habs Eyes on the Prize on the phone. Now, this Jeff Petrie injury kind of throws a wrench into everything, and it really, that's the only time that Marc Bergevin looks like a genius, right? Every year he talks about never having enough great defensemen or good defensemen, 8, 9, 10 deep. It doesn't matter. He loves collecting defensemen, probably because he was a 20-year defenseman in the league. But that brings us to Zach Redmond and what this could potentially do for him. You look at Greg Pattern, who's been here the last couple of years, very steady, very reliable, certainly not known as a puck-moving defenseman, but just kind of like a pillar, a rock, a guy who really does look like he should be in the NHL. But Zach Redmond's kind of a wild card. He's played well in preseason, Aruny. Do you think that maybe he even leapfrogs the bottom six pairing and takes Petry's spot maybe even on the second pairing here if Petry's out for a few games?
I don't really think so. I don't think the Canadians really would want to try a defenseman that they haven't really had much time to evaluate. But I'm looking down that right defenseman line, and again, the Canadians seem to be very not. They don't seem to have much in terms of depth in terms of their defensemen. Behind Zach Redmond, you really have a guy like Brent Lerneau or Brian Johnson. So if push comes to shove, yes, they will definitely put him up there, but as long as they don't have to, I don't think they'll force him into the lineup.
Amanda, what's his ceiling, Zach Redmond? I mean, we saw some flashes, but that's preseason. He's the guy who couldn't make the Avalanche, right?
I mean, I would say that is his ceiling. Flashes here and there. Limited use would probably be the opportunity to get the best out of him. He's a hard-hitting guy. He can create a bit of space. He can rough things up when he needs to, and I think that's what his ceiling is to make the most of a minimal amount of time on the ice. If he's a guy who's on a roster, on a game day roster, you might see a bunch of the veterans picking up those minutes and only throwing Redmond out there maybe on the penalty kill, making a bit of space or in front of the net a couple times. But I don't think the expectations are very high, but they certainly like what they've seen from him, especially when you compare him against someone like Barbera that we were talking before. Zach Redmond took this training camp, excuse the expression, but by the balls. He took it by the balls and he said, I am going to make this team, or I'm going to make it a difficult decision, and we've seen that happen here. That doesn't mean that he's going to play a ton. Sorry, that doesn't mean he's going to play a ton, but he's giving himself a chance, and a deserved one.
Habs breakfast here on Weekend Game Plan with Matthew Ross from Luigi. Hi, guys. Radulov will have the most points on the team this year. You heard it here. All right, well, we'll keep your text, and we'll frame it somewhere. Marc Bergevin allowed Nail to sail. Too bad, as he went for a bag of pucks and would have looked so good in red, white, and blue alongside Galley and Radman. So that's one unnamed texter I guess lamenting the fact that Nail Yakupov went to the Blues as opposed to the Canadians. But final thought here, Mike Condon is a guy that we don't expect to be with the team when it comes down to that cut-down deadline of Tuesday at 5 p.m. Is Marc Bergevin, first question is to Amanda, is Marc Bergevin kind of just out of courtesy keeping Condon as long as he can before he, sends him down to the ECHL meals? Or
I don't know about ECHL meals, but certainly yes. I don't think you can afford the opportunity of carrying three goaltenders. I don't think it's necessary. I think we've seen that Al Montoya is going to take this job, and personally for me, I don't think it was ever in question who is going to have this backup role the minute there was pen to paper on Al Montoya's contract. I think perhaps they wanted to see more of Mike Condon in this training camp, but for me, it was never an option. It was not an option. It was always going to be Price Montoya. There wasn't even a competition, even though they keep saying there is.
I mean, it's interesting they haven't released him yet to give him a chance, to get with another team. Why it's, I guess all teams are kind of waiting in the same kind of flux as well.
But also keep in mind that Montreal did have, Carey Price wasn't there for a lot of the training camp. So that might have changed things along the way there. But because you've only had Carey Price in one game, their final game, it makes sense that they would be carrying. They would keep these guys around.
All right. And a final question for you, Aruny. Any disappointments at the camp for you?
Probably Charles Hudon. He's a guy who does incredibly well on the St. John's Ice Caps, and to see him not even get down to the final roster cut is extremely disappointing.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame. Another guy, maybe flashes. It's hard to really predict what's going to happen here and whether or not he'll be with the Canadians long term. It's been Habs Breakfast here on TSN 690. That was the voice of Amanda Stein here in studio. She'll be back for the 8:30 Sports Center update. And our thanks to Aruny Siv of Habs Eyes on the Prize as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.